Imagine you bought a stock 10 years ago. It's up 600%. You decide to sell. You do the math. Federal tax, state tax, net investment income tax. On $280 million in gains, you just handed $80 million to the government, permanently. You will never see that $80 million again. It will never compound. It will never grow. It is gone the moment you hit sell. Now, here's what the family that actually owned that stock did instead. They didn't sell. They called their banker, and they borrowed $190 million against it at 3.4% interest. Same liquidity, zero tax event. The asset keeps compounding. That single decision, sell versus borrow, is worth $340 million over 30 years. Not from a better investment, not from a smarter strategy. The return assumption is identical. The only difference is what they refused to pay. This is the rule that separates generational wealth from everyone else, and nobody teaches it because the people who know it have a very strong incentive to make sure you don't. Here's the financial behavior that keeps most Americans exactly where they are. Asset goes up, sell it, pay the tax, reinvest what's left. It feels responsible. It feels like taking profits. It feels like the smart move. It is the most expensive habit in the American middle class. And it's not your fault. It's what every financial advisor, every personal finance book, and every retirement calculator was built around, the concept of realizing gains. But here's what that phrase actually means in practice. Realizing gains means converting a permanent productive asset, something that generates income, appreciates, and can be used as collateral, into a temporary pile of cash. Cash that gets taxed immediately. Cash that sits in a savings account earning less than inflation. Cash that gets reinvested at a higher cost basis with less capital than you started with. The wealthy don't realize gains. They borrow against them. The asset stays. The compounding continues. The tax event never happens. And here's the part that should genuinely make you angry. This is not a secret. This is not a loophole. This is not something that requires a team of lawyers to access. It is a fundamental principle of how money actually works that is systematically never explained to the people who need it most. Because the financial services industry makes money when you sell. Transaction fees, tax preparation, reinvestment commissions. Your sell button is their revenue button. Every time you hit it, they win. Let me show you the math that changed how I think about every asset I will ever own. Picture two scenarios. Same family, same stock, same starting position. $280 million in unrealized gains on a position they've held for 11 years. Scenario 1. They sell. Federal capital gains tax, 20%. Net investment income tax, 3.8%. State tax, 4.95%. Total tax bill is approximately $80 million. They reinvest the remaining $200 million. It compounds at 8% annually for 30 years. Final value, $2.01 billion. Scenario 2. They borrow. They take a $190 million lending facility at 3.4% annually. The original position stays intact. It continues to compound at 8%. The interest loan is paid from the income generated by the asset itself. Final value, $2.35 billion. The difference, $340 million. $340 million. Think about what that buys. Houses, businesses, generational security. That massive difference didn't come from a better investment or a higher return or some genius trade. It came from refusing to trigger a tax event, from understanding that selling is not a neutral act. Selling is a permanent subtraction. Every dollar you pay in capital gains tax is a dollar that will never compound again, ever, for any member of your family, for any generation that follows. The wealthy don't think in returns, they think in permanence, and the first rule of permanence is never sell what is working. So how does this actually work? Let me explain the mechanism, because once you understand it, you will never look at your assets the same way again. An asset that is appreciating has two forms of value. The first is obvious, it's market value, what you could sell it for. The second is invisible to most people, it's collateral value, what you can borrow against it. Banks will lend you money against almost any appreciating asset: stocks, real estate, a business, a portfolio of bonds. Typically, they'll lend you 50 to 70% of the asset's value at interest rates significantly lower than the asset's return. If your asset earns 8% and your loan costs 3.4%, you're pocketing the 4.6% spread every year on the full value of the asset while paying zero tax on the appreciation. This is what the wealthy call leverage utility, not leverage as risk, but leverage as a tool for creating liquidity from an illiquid position without ever triggering the event that diminishes it. Now, here's what the part that most people miss. The loan doesn't need to be repaid from your salary. It gets repaid from the income the asset itself generates: dividends, rental income, business distributions. The asset pays for its own liquidity. You never have to choose between growth and access. You get both. The middle class is constantly forced to make a choice the wealthy never have to make: sell the asset to access the value or keep the asset and have no liquidity. The borrow don't sell strategy eliminates that choice entirely, and it's available to anyone with an appreciating asset and a relationship with a lender. You don't need $280 million, you just need the concept. Here's the insight that took me the longest to understand. The wealthy don't have a portfolio, they have a structure, and the difference between those two words is the difference between building wealth and keeping it. A portfolio is a collection of assets. You own them, they go up or down, you sell some, you buy others. A structure is different. In a structure, every asset serves multiple functions simultaneously. Real estate is held through a series of LLCs, each one a separate legal container protecting the others. Equity positions are held in a trust designed to step up the cost basis at death, eliminating the embedded gain entirely for the next generation. Here's what this means in practice. A piece of real estate earns rental income, but it also secures a credit facility at 50% loan to value, which funds the next acquisition, which also serves as collateral, which funds the next. The assets are not a stack, they are a lattice. Each one supports the weight of the others. Selling one doesn't just remove its contribution, it weakens every surrounding node. This is why the wealthy don't sell even when the price is right, even when an offer comes in at 12 times EBITDA from a sovereign wealth fund, because the asset isn't just worth its sale price, it's worth its sale price plus its collateral value, plus its income stream, plus its structural role in everything connected to it. For them, the offer was never real. Selling is not a transaction. Selling is an ending. Now, I need to tell you about the most powerful tax strategy in the American tax code. It is completely legal. It has been in the code for decades, and almost nobody in the middle class knows it exists. It's called the step up in cost basis at death. Here's how it works. You buy a stock for $10. It grows to $1,000 over your lifetime. You never sell. You hold it until you die. When that asset passes to your heirs, the cost basis resets to $1,000. The $990 in gains, the appreciation that happened over your entire lifetime, is eliminated permanently. The government never sees it. Your heirs can sell the asset the day after they inherit it and pay zero capital gains tax. This is not a loophole for billionaires. This is a provision in the tax code that is available to anyone who holds an appreciating asset until death. The strategy is simple. Never sell the asset. Borrow against it to fund your lifestyle. Pass it to your heirs with a stepped-up basis. The government never sees the gain, not because you hid it, not because you used some exotic offshore structure, but because you understood one rule that most people never learn. The tax event only happens when you sell. So the wealthy have a simple policy encoded across generations. We do not sell. Here's something the original math doesn't fully capture. When you sell an asset, you don't just lose the tax, you lose the compounding on the tax. You lose the compounding on the transaction costs. You lose the compounding on the spread between what you reinvest at and what the original asset would have returned. And you lose something that has no dollar value at all:
the relationship between the asset and the rest of your financial structure. Here's a counterintuitive observation most financial advisors will never tell you. Diversification, the idea that you should spread your wealth across many assets, is advice designed for people who don't have enough of any single asset to borrow against. For the wealthy, concentration is the strategy, not reckless concentration, structured concentration. One great asset, held forever, borrowed against strategically, passed to the next generation with a stepped-up basis. The diversification advice you've been given your whole life is correct for your current situation, but it is not the destination. The destination is an asset so good and a structure so sound that you never need to sell it. That is the actual goal, not a diversified portfolio of things you'll eventually liquidate, a permanent claim on the world's productive output that compounds forever, tax-free.